took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." But he refused. "With me in charge," he told her, "my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. Now then, could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" Notice that he didn't say against Potiphar, he said against God, didn't he? Okay, Spirit-filled man. And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. One day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. Joseph was like exit stage left. He was gone, man. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called her household servants. "Look," she said to them, "this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came here to sleep with me, but I screamed. And when he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." She kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. Then she told him this story. "That Hebrew slave you brought us came to me to make sport of me. But as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." When his master heard the story, his wife told him, saying, "This is how your slave treated me." He burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. Wow. Joseph gets sold out by his brothers, gets thrown into a well, gets sold into slavery. The Ishmaelites take him. He gets bought up by Potiphar. Things go well for Joseph because the Lord was what? And anything Joseph did what? Prospered. You know, it's an interesting scripture that my wife and I have clinged to all of our ministry years. Is blessed are those who bless me, and cursed are those who curse me. When God blesses his children, that blessing goes into the lives of others, doesn't it? You carry with you the blessing of the Lord. And Joseph had God's blessing with him. Whatever Joseph did, it prospered. And because of God's blessing on Joseph, Potiphar prospered. Put Joseph in charge. Life was good, man. Joseph, he went from slave to being in charge. He was doing it all right. Joseph was a hard worker, man. He was doing it all right, wasn't he? He was a man of integrity. And what did he get out of it? He just got so wonderfully rewarded, didn't he? No, he got false accused. You ever remember that commandment? Thou shalt not bear. Yeah. It's not one that we think about a lot, but I wonder, do we ever bear false witness about people? Pharaoh or Potiphar trusted Joseph. He started realizing everything Joseph put his hand to, he prospered. Joseph did the right thing. His wife couldn't stand it. Manipulated the situation, and Joseph got thrown back into jail. You know how long he was there? 15 more years. Joseph was there. When we first met Joseph, he was about 17 years old. Got thrown down in the well. Then he gets taken out of the well. So for 15 years, Joseph ends up back in prison. Now, I want to suggest a few ways that he could have responded. I think this is such a neat story. And I wondered how I would have responded in Joseph's situation. What about you? What would be the normal way that we could respond? I think the first natural response would be one of anger and bitterness. I mean, Joseph could have been angry about what happened. I mean, he did everything right. He was a man of integrity. He put his master's wishes above his own. The second thing, I think, attitude that Joseph perhaps could have had was to manipulate the situation. That's a normal response. You know what he could have did was he could have went back and he could have shared with all of the prisoners and everything about the injustice that had done, and he could have spun it for his own purpose and his own glory. He could have shared it in such a way that maybe that which was in the darkness, the injustice of Potiphar's wife, could have been exposed. He could have brought the drama to the whole thing to satisfy his personal need. Could it have been that Joseph, though, even in jail, still had respect for Potiphar? The third response that he could have had was he could have forgot God and His promises. Forsake God and even forsake those earlier dreams that he had. I mean, how would we respond to the affliction that Joseph was suffering? How do we respond today when something like this comes up in our life? When somebody shares something, or when you have to work with somebody that's just a miserable person to work with, or you find yourself in a situation that you're really not pleased with, are you angry and bitter? And when you find yourself that people are persecuting you, do you manipulate the situation for your own good to make sure that the truth comes out? Or do you fade back into the woodwork and forsake your God and your faith and the promises that you have? Did Joseph do that? Let's move forward over to chapter 40. I'm going to kind of zip through this a little bit quicker, Brian, than I laid it out. Genesis 40. Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard in the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph. He attended them. And after they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why are your faces so sad today?" "We both had dreams," they answered, "but there is no one to interpret them." Then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." And so the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, "In my dream I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine there were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and it clustered, ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand." "This is what it means," Joseph said to him. "The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison, for I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon." When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a favorable interpretation, he said to Joseph, "I too had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh. But the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." "This is what it means," Joseph said. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat away your flesh. I'm sure that just kind of got him all excited, didn't it? Now the 3rd day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position so that he once again put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. We're going to stop there. There's a lot of scripture coming at us. So now we're kind of remembering the story. Joseph gets sold out, gets thrown in the well. He gets bought up. He gets carried into Egypt by the Ishmaelites. He gets sold to Potiphar's house. Potiphar puts him in charge of everything. Joseph is blessed because of God's hand on Joseph and the blessing of God. Potiphar is blessed. Potiphar's wife busts a move on Joseph. Joseph runs. She lies about it. He's thrown back in jail. And while he's in jail, he's in the same place that the cupbearer and the chief baker are, that Pharaoh had issues with, and they have dreams, and Joseph interprets them. The dreams, his interpretation is proved to be factual. One of them the cupbearer regains his position and has life. The chief baker lost his head. I'm sorry, I got paused there. I wonder just what exactly he did. There's no yeast in this bread. I don't know. And I don't know what happened, but and then Joseph, after he did all of that, all he said was, he goes, "Hey man, ever since I was a little kid, things haven't been going my way. If you could just remember me when you get to Pharaoh." The only thing he asked for. But in 23, it said the chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. So let's go back to the subject of response. How did Joseph respond? I mean, we see what's going on here. How could he continue to demonstrate the kind of character that we've witnessed in him? How do you think he did that? Because I think if we could